If someone told me 5 years ago that I'd one day vanish from my own wedding plans without a single goodbye, I would have laughed. I'm not the kind of guy who ghosts people, especially not the woman I was planning to marry. But life has a funny way of peeling back layers you didn't know existed, and sometimes, all it takes is one overheard sentence to unravel the whole illusion. My name's Asher. I'm 33 years old, a real estate investor on paper, but I mostly just say I work with properties to keep conversations simple. I grew up lower middle class. Parents were teachers, good people, never flashy. I paid my way through college flipping rundown student rentals, and by the time I was 28, I'd built a small portfolio under an LLC I quietly named after my grandfather. Nothing crazy, 3 duplexes, 2 standalone homes, and a modest lakefront place I keep for myself. No mortgages, no debt, just a lot of elbow grease, smart timing, and keeping my mouth shut. That last part, the keeping my mouth shut bit, that used to be a strength. I met Clara at a friend's engagement party. She was beautiful in that bright, effortless way. Honey brown curls, sharp green eyes, a laugh that made you feel like you were in on something private. She was 29, an interior designer with a growing client list and a stunning Instagram presence. She had opinions about curtains, fonts, and espresso machines, and I didn't always understand what she was talking about, but I liked how she talked about it. Passion is rare. I'd spent so long in practical, dust-covered spaces that her world of light fixtures and aesthetics felt refreshing. Things moved quickly. We were official within a month, living together by 6, and by the 1-year mark, we were planning vacations and talking about kids. Clara didn't know much about my finances, and that was on purpose. It wasn't secrecy, it was habit. I'd had exes in the past who suddenly grew very interested when they realized the house I lived in wasn't rented and that I didn't flinch at $200 dinner bills. So I played it low-key. Clara thought I worked for a small property management company, and I let her think that. We split costs on everyday stuff. She never paid rent. My suggestion, since we lived in my place, but she offered to decorate it, and she did. The girl could turn drywall into a magazine spread. To her credit, Clara wasn't overtly materialistic. She wasn't one of those women posting #blessed next to a luxury handbag. But she liked nice things and had a strange relationship with ownership. I noticed it when she'd say things like our couch, even though I'd bought it before we met, or when she'd host her friends and call the house her project. I didn't mind at first. Honestly, I liked that she felt at home. What started to bug me was how quickly her family followed suit. Her mom, Melinda, had this way of touching every item in our home like she was sizing it up. "Oh, this backsplash is adorable," she'd say, running her fingers along the tile. "Clara really has an eye, doesn't she? When the two of you eventually get the deeds sorted, I hope you'll keep her name first." That was the first time I blinked. "The deed's not really something we're changing," I said casually. Melinda just smiled, like I was a child saying I wanted to be an astronaut. Clara brushed it off later. "She doesn't mean anything by it," she told me, curling into my side on the couch. "She just assumes we'll co-own everything after we're married. She's old school." I nodded, but something itched at me. The assumption. The certainty. Like my house was just a placeholder until Clara's name got stitched onto it like monogram towels. Still, I didn't push it. We were engaged at that point. She said yes when I proposed at the lake house with her favorite wine and a dumb little inside joke carved into the ring box. I was all in. And yeah, a small part of me hoped that marriage would smooth over whatever weird little cracks were starting to show. Then came the prenup conversation. I brought it up gently, over coffee. Nothing formal, just a hey, I've been thinking about putting together a prenup. Not because I don't trust you, but because I've worked hard to build some of this stuff before we met, and I just think it's smart. Clara's face fell like I'd suggested a funeral instead of a wedding. "A prenup?" she repeated, like the word tasted sour. "Yeah, just something basic. It doesn't change anything day to day." She set her mug down and crossed her arms. "It changes everything. It says you don't believe in us. It ruins the romance, Asher. I'm not marrying you so I can take your stuff." I wanted to ask, "Then why does it bother you?" But instead, I said, "Okay," just like that. Because love, right? Because maybe she was right and I was being too business-minded about something that was supposed to be sacred. So I let it go. No prenup. No further discussion. I chose trust. I chose Clara. And I would have kept choosing her, blind and stupid, if it weren't for the phone call. It was 2 weeks later. Clara was in the kitchen, on speakerphone with her sister, Jenna, who'd never liked me much and didn't care to hide it. I was in the hallway, out of sight, trying to fix the cabinet hinge that had been squeaking for weeks. I wasn't eavesdropping. I swear I wasn't. I was just frozen, because I heard Clara laugh. This sharp, giddy laugh I hadn't heard since the engagement. And then, Jenna, relax. Once the ring's on, I'm transferring the house into my name. He doesn't even realize it's not protected. It's under his LLC, not personal. It's like free real estate. She laughed again, louder this time. My stomach didn't drop. It caved in. There was this buzzing in my ears, like TV static. I waited for Jenna to say something like, "That's a joke, right?" Or, "You're not seriously planning that." But Jenna just hummed like she was sipping tea. "I told you," she said. "These property guys always think they're smarter than everyone. Just smile and nod, then do what you have to do." I didn't move. Not when Clara hung up. Not when she came into the hallway and kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted to go look at centerpiece designs that weekend. I didn't say a word. I just smiled. And 2 days later, I called my lawyer. You'd think that overhearing your fiancé plotting to take your house would make everything after that feel like background noise. But what I didn't expect, what really cracked something inside me, was how normal everything looked the next morning. She made pancakes, wore my hoodie, played Fleetwood Mac like it was any other Saturday. I sat there chewing rubbery bites while she scrolled Pinterest for wedding bouquet inspiration. She had a whimsical autumn romance theme picked out, rust orange and dusty rose. I nodded at every photo like I hadn't just heard her treat our relationship like a real estate heist. At some point, she glanced up and said, "Hey, my parents want to come over for dinner next weekend. Maybe we could show them the table setups." I said sure. I said sure a lot after that. I don't know if it was cowardice or calculation. Maybe both. But I knew then that confronting her wouldn't fix anything. She wasn't confused. She wasn't making an offhand comment. That phone call was clarity. It was the mask slipping. And once you see it, once you hear it, there's no putting it back on. So I waited. Quietly. Meanwhile, the cracks widened. Melinda and her husband, Clara's dad, Richard, came over that next weekend. Richard was the passive type, always sipping scotch and checking football scores. But Melinda? She strutted in like she owned the place. Literally. "You know," she said, placing her purse right on the kitchen island. "This house has really grown on me. I was telling Clara, once it's theirs, they should host Thanksgiving here every year. That fireplace is perfect for family photos." I looked at Clara. She didn't flinch. Melinda continued, "I already put a deposit on those gold-rimmed charger plates you liked. You're reimbursing me, by the way." Clara smiled sweetly. "Of course, Mom." Asher said he'd handle the decor budget. Did I? That was news to me. The conversation shifted to catering, and I sat there in my own dining room like an intern at a company party. I wasn't being asked, I was being assigned. Later that night, I checked the wedding budget spreadsheet Clara had made. My name was at the top, next to the words, "Primary Contributor." No discussion, no agreement, just listed. I scrolled down. Tent rental, $8,000. Paid. Flowers, $5,200. Deposit made. Cake, $1,100. Paid. Almost every major vendor was already secured, through my card. It wasn't just the money. It was the way I'd been factored in like a bank account. Not a partner. Not even a person, really. Just a wallet with legs. That phrase stuck with me for some reason. Wallet with legs. I started repeating it in my head whenever Clara handed me receipts with that casual, "just cover this for now" smile. And she did it often. She wanted a live string quartet for the ceremony. A rare, discontinued Vera Wang gown. Custom calligraphy for every invitation. I could have said no to any of it. But she always asked at the right time. After sex, after drinks, after distracting me with her laughter, or rubbing my shoulders like she was smoothing over a speed bump. It was subtle, but I began to feel less like someone she loved and more like someone she was managing. I told myself I was paranoid, that maybe I was twisting her actions to fit the worst version of her. But then came the brunch. Her younger brother, Corey, had just gotten engaged too, and we were all meeting his fiancée at this trendy place downtown. It was me, Clara, Corey, his fiancée Lily, and both sets of parents. They'd gotten the back patio reserved for close family and significant others. When we arrived, Melinda made a show of greeting everyone like royalty. When it came to me, she barely brushed my shoulder with her hand. Asher, she said. You look tired. Working too hard. Clara giggled. He's always tired. But at least the house looks nice, right? That got a laugh from everyone except Lily, who looked visibly uncomfortable. I tried to shake it off until the waiter brought the champagne for a toast. To the future Bennetts. Clara's dad cheered, raising his glass. I went to clink mine, but Melinda interjected. Oh, let's not forget to toast our upcoming wedding too. Clara and Asher's special day is around the corner. Everyone clinked again, but what she said next is what really stuck. I always knew Clara would land well. She's a smart girl. Knows how to pick a man with resources. That word. Resources. It wasn't even subtle anymore. I looked at Clara. She didn't say a word. Didn't correct her mom. Didn't glance at me like, sorry, she's being weird. She just sipped her drink and smiled. Later, Lily pulled me aside in the parking lot. Hey, can I ask you something weird? I nodded. Do you feel like you're being swallowed whole by this wedding? I laughed, unsure how else to respond. She frowned. Clara's not the same around you. She's different in private, right? I hesitated. She used to be, I said. Lily's eyes softened. If you need help, say something. Corey and I, well, we're not blind. That night, I opened a new spreadsheet. Not for the wedding. For the exit. I started tracking everything I'd paid for. Copies of every receipt. Screenshots of text messages. Vendor contracts. I wasn't planning to sue. I just wanted a record. A breadcrumb trail of how this whole thing was spiraling. And then came the registry. Clara invited me to her laptop one evening, bubbly and excited, to show me what she'd added to our dream wish list. Except it wasn't just blenders and dishware. She'd added a new set of keys for a Tesla, a king-sized canopy bed, a $4,000 espresso machine. Babe, I said slowly, this isn't a registry. It's a ransom note. She rolled her eyes. It's just for fun. People know we're aiming high. Besides, you've got it. You're doing well. Everyone knows that. Everyone. She blinked. I mean, you don't hide it very well. I had. Until her mother poked around in our mail. Until Clara peeked over my shoulder at a tax form. Until her dad made some comment about Asher probably writing the IRS checks with a gold pen. I realized then, they'd all been doing the math behind my back. And I'd been giving them the numbers. Every single time. Still, I kept quiet. I kept planning. I called the venue and asked about cancellation policies. I spoke to my lawyer. I reviewed the LLC status on the property. Then came the final push. One afternoon, I came home early to grab a document I'd forgotten. Clara wasn't expecting me. I walked in and heard her on the phone again. Her voice was lower than usual. No, Jenna, it's fine. He's obsessed with the venue. He won't back out. I told you. Once we're married, the LLC becomes marital property, and I can challenge it. Worst case scenario, I say I contributed to renovations and push for partial ownership. She paused. I'm not worried. He's too in love. And stupid. That word echoed like a gunshot. Stupid. She laughed, this bitter little laugh like she couldn't believe her luck. That was it. Not the registry. Not Melinda. Not the budgeting or snide brunch comments. That word. I turned around, walked out of the house, and sat in my car for over an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. I started making calls. I rescheduled appointments. I adjusted payment methods. I transferred bookings out of my name. And exactly 6 days later, while Clara was at her final gown fitting, I moved out. But not before leaving one final surprise. Because if Clara wanted a show, she was going to get one. I didn't sleep the night before I left. Not even a little. It wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was this strange, hollow quiet. Like I'd already stepped out of the world I'd been living in and was just watching the pieces float away. The only thing I packed was a duffel bag, 2 pairs of jeans, a week's worth of clothes, my laptop, a folder with every wedding-related invoice Clara's family insisted I just take care of. I left everything else behind. I didn't need to take back the couch, the custom lighting, or the designer plates she'd insisted on ordering for our private tastings. She could have it. All of it. The only thing I really wanted to take with me was the truth, and she'd already gifted that to me, wrapped in a phone call and tied with a bitter little laugh. When I left that morning, the house was spotless. I made the bed, took out the trash, even cleaned the coffee pot. I don't know why. Maybe because I wanted to remember that, for a time, I actually cared about the life we were building. Or maybe because I wanted to make sure she knew I'd walked out on purpose, not in haste. That it wasn't a tantrum. It was a statement. I left the key on the table, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, just neatly beside a folded sheet of printer paper. The paper wasn't a note to Clara. It was a single-line message to the cleaning service. Please cancel future appointments. Home is vacated. She wouldn't find it until later. Not until the florist called her in a panic, asking why someone had canceled all future deliveries and told them the wedding was off. That was how she found out. Not from me. Not from a long, heartfelt breakup speech. From a confused woman holding $800 worth of white roses. And that was the day the text started. First came the panic. Asher? What is going on? Where are you? I just talked to the florist. Tell me this is a mistake. Then the anger. Did you seriously just disappear? You ruined everything. My parents are furious. You better explain this now. Then the guilt. Can we please just talk? I didn't mean it like that. You know how my sister is. I was just venting. Please don't do this. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because there was nothing left to say. She didn't slip up. She plotted. She schemed. She mocked me to her sister. She sat across from me every day, knowing what she intended to do, and smiled while I footed the bill. What was I supposed to say? Oops. Instead, I booked a room at a quiet hotel about 30 minutes away. One of those small, business travel places with blackout curtains and slightly too firm pillows. It wasn't much, but it was mine for now. I sat on the bed that first night, scrolling through my emails, forwarding all the venue and vendor cancellations to Clara's parents' address. They'd insisted on the original bookings being under my name. Streamlines the payments, Melinda had said. So I streamlined the refunds directly into their inbox. Attached to each message was a copy of the invoices. The florist, the caterer, the tent rental, the venue, the band, the cake. Altogether, $43,728.41. No note. Just receipts. Let them do the math. That week was a blur. Not because I was busy, but because I wasn't. The quiet hit like a freight train. After a year of wedding meetings, family dinners, constant texts about napkin colors, and seating charts, there was nothing. No one needed me. No one was asking me to pay for anything. No one was sweet-talking me into a small splurge. It should have felt freeing. It didn't. Not at first. I woke up each day feeling like I'd fallen off the map. The phone buzzed now and then, Clara's name, always hovering at the top of my screen like a reminder of everything I'd walked away from. But I never picked up. I couldn't. Every time I saw her name, I heard her voice again. He's too in love. And stupid. Those words stayed with me like frostbite. I spent my days walking. Just walking. I'd find a coffee shop, order something simple, sit outside and watch people pass by. Couples holding hands. Kids laughing. Older folks talking about weekend plans. Life just happening. Untouched by betrayal. I envied them. But slowly, quietly, something inside me began to shift. I wasn't just walking aimlessly. I was observing. Thinking. Remembering who I was before all of this. I started opening old files. Projects I'd shelved. Properties I'd been too distracted to check in on. One of the duplexes in my portfolio was sitting half vacant. I called my contractor, asked for a quote on updates. Another home needed landscaping work before winter. I scheduled it. I reconnected with my accountant, revised my cash flow plan, consolidated some lines of income. I hadn't looked this closely at my own books in over a year. It felt like dusting off a part of myself that had been buried beneath wedding dresses and charger plates. For the first time in months, I wasn't spending, I was building again. And I was sharper than ever. With every spreadsheet I updated, with every contractor call I made, I started to feel like myself again. Not Clara's fiancé. Not Melinda's walking wallet. Just Asher. The guy who used to see potential in cracked windows and rotting porch steps. I leaned in. I made a list of goals I'd let slip. A commercial property I'd been eyeing for months. I put in an offer. A small real estate podcast I'd been invited to guest on a year ago, but ignored because wedding stuff got in the way. I reached out. We recorded a 2-part episode about smart asset protection, and I didn't mention Clara once. But when the host asked me what I'd learned about trust in business, I paused for a long second and simply said, everything. It felt good. Quiet, steady good. Not explosive revenge. Not flashy payback. Just quiet, personal clarity. Clara, meanwhile, did not go quietly. One day, I made the mistake of checking her Instagram. I don't know why. Morbid curiosity, maybe. She hadn't posted anything about the cancellation. No dramatic breakup announcement. No public dragging. Just curated silence. But I noticed something. Her photos started changing. The "we" captions disappeared. The soft couple shots gave way to solo mirror selfies and vaguely poetic quotes. One, in particular, stood out. Sometimes the person you trust most shows you why you should have trusted yourself instead. The irony almost made me laugh. I didn't comment. Didn't reach out. But the comments were full of heart emojis and your glowing messages. Of course she was. She always landed on her feet. But me? I was learning to stand again. And then she emailed. Not text. Not a call. A full email. Formal. Subject line, a few things. She asked for some items she'd left behind. Some of her design books, a set of cookware her aunt had gifted her, a pair of heels she'd worn maybe once. And, oddly enough, the houseplants. I know this is awkward, she wrote. But I think we should meet and talk. In person. One last time. There are things I need to say. I didn't respond right away. I reread the message 5 times. I thought about how much of myself I'd bent to keep that relationship alive. How many compromises I'd made. How many subtle insults I'd swallowed because love is supposed to be patient, understanding, forgiving. But what happens when love is only expected from one side? What happens when you give someone the benefit of the doubt, and they use it to draw a blueprint for betrayal? I stared at the screen for a long time, and then I typed out a response. 3 sentences. Polite, firm, clear. But before I hit send, I got a call from her father. And what he said, that changed everything. Because I expected begging. I expected apologies. I even expected anger. But what I didn't expect was what he knew and who he blamed. It was around 10:30 on a Thursday morning when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't saved but instantly recognized. Clara's dad, Richard. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. My thumb hovered over the decline button. He was the one family member who had always stayed in the background, never pushing, never overly warm either. Just present. The kind of man who lived in the shadow of his wife's opinions and his daughter's ambitions. I almost didn't answer. I thought maybe it was a trap, that Clara had sent him in as some neutral third party to guilt-trip me into talking. But something told me to pick up, and what he said, it rewrote everything. Asher, he began, his voice low and tired, like he'd been rehearsing the call all night. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. It depends, I said carefully. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I blinked. For what? He sighed. For not stepping in. For letting things get this far. And for how Melinda's been acting. How Clara's been acting. Silence. I didn't know the half of it, he continued. But I know enough now. I sat up straighter. What are you talking about? I found your email, he said. The one with all the invoices. I looked through every line. Every payment you made. Every deposit that was expected of you. I did the math, Asher. And then I had a long conversation with Jenna. Clara's sister? She came over yesterday, he said. Said she was tired of watching Clara play puppet master and act like the victim online. Said there were things I should know. I swallowed hard. Like what? Like how long Clara's been planning to sink her name into your property. How she and Melinda have been working the prenup angle since the engagement. They had an actual plan. A timeline, for God's sake. I found notes in Melinda's drawer, lists of assets, projected post-marriage gains, even a folder labeled Long Game. I rubbed my temple. You're telling me your wife and daughter were scheming to what? Trap me into a one-sided marriage. I'm telling you, Richard said, voice firming, that I was a fool for thinking they wouldn't. And I'm done playing dumb. I didn't speak for a few seconds. The silence on the line stretched. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I want to make it right. Or at least stop it from getting worse. I know it doesn't fix anything. But if there's something you're planning, something to protect yourself, I want to help. I laughed. Not a happy laugh. A shocked, bitter one. You want to help me burn your daughter's wedding plans to the ground? I want to help you stop being used. There it was. No sugarcoating. No sidestepping. We talked for another 20 minutes. He told me about the rift growing between him and Melinda. How he'd been sidelined during every step of the wedding. How Clara had been feeding him half-truths, manipulating both families to get what she wanted. He admitted that for years, he'd just played the role of the passive provider, letting Melinda take the reins because it was easier than fighting. But this had crossed a line. When the call ended, I sat motionless for a long time, letting it all settle. And then I opened a blank notebook. I drew a line down the center. On the left, what they know. On the right, what I know. I began listing everything Clara and her family believed about me. What they assumed I'd given up. What they thought they'd secured. No prenup. Venue paid in full. Vendors secured. House unprotected. LLC, technically, joint after marriage. All emotional leverage on their side. They thought I was still in love. Still hoping. Still stupid. They didn't know I'd moved out of the house. They didn't know I'd been tracking every receipt. They didn't know I'd recorded the conversation she had with Jenna. And they definitely didn't know that I still had full ownership of the house through an LLC that wasn't even in my name. That's right. When I formed the company years ago, I listed the managing member as my cousin, Devin, an attorney who specializes in asset protection. My name is nowhere on the property deed. It runs through the LLC, which in turn runs through a trust Devin manages. Legally, it's mine. But on paper? Good luck proving it without a signed confession or years of litigation. The house Clara was planning to transfer into her name? She'd need a treasure map to even find it. That night, I called Devin. Hey, I said, got a minute? For you? Always. What's up? I need to finalize something with the LLC. I want to move the house into a different trust, one that's locked down tighter. Something bulletproof. Asset protection? He asked. You expecting a lawsuit? Not exactly. I'm expecting an attempted coup disguised as a wedding. There was a pause. Clara, he guessed. Clara. He let out a slow whistle. All right then. I'll handle it. Want to be aggressive or quiet? Quiet, I said. For now. We met the next morning. Set everything up. Transferred the property. Drew up a document trail that looped in 3 different entities and a Delaware holding structure. Clara could bring every lawyer she wanted. She'd still be 5 steps behind. With the property locked down, I turned my focus back to the wedding. There was one piece still left hanging. The venue. It was the crown jewel of Clara's Pinterest-perfect wedding fantasy. A vineyard just outside the city, complete with a lakeside gazebo, a 200-person tent, and an on-site chef who made handmade pasta for every reception. She'd been obsessed with it since before we even got engaged. And I'd booked it under my name. I'd already canceled once. But what Clara didn't know was that the venue had a waiting list, a long one. And the next couple in line? Eager. Newly engaged. Willing to pay a premium. I called the coordinator. Hey, this is Asher. I canceled a few weeks ago, but I'd like to discuss reopening that date under a new name. She hesitated. The same wedding? No. Different couple. Would you still be the payer? No, I said. This time, it'll be under their name. I just want to transfer the deposit. She checked, then said, that's actually doable. There'd be a small processing fee, but we can refund your remaining balance once it's covered. Perfect. I made the switch. Then I emailed the new couple. Wished them the best. Enjoy the handmade pasta, I thought. Melinda called 3 days later. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice tight, furious, teetering on the edge of composed. Asher, we were just informed by the vineyard that our date is no longer available. They said the deposit was transferred. I don't know what you're playing at, but you have 1 day to fix this, or we will be talking to our lawyer. I played the message twice, then deleted it. Clara's messages became more frantic after that. Still no accountability, just confusion, accusation, desperation. I don't understand why you're doing this. We were supposed to build something together. I made mistakes, I admit that. But we can fix it. Please don't throw it all away. Throw it away? She had no idea I'd been holding everything up in the first place. And the final setup? That came from an unlikely source. Her sister, Jenna. She emailed me out of the blue. Not a text. Not a call. An actual email. Subject, I think you should know. She laid out everything. The conversations. The plan. Even screenshots Clara had sent her about getting the house in her name, bragging about how easy it would be to get a judge on her side if we ever split. She never deserved you, Jenna wrote. And for what it's worth, I told her that. But she doesn't listen to anyone except herself. At the bottom of the email was an audio file. A voice recording. Clara, ranting on speakerphone. I hit play. I mean, worst case? I'll cry in court. Say he isolated me. Say I contributed emotionally to his business or whatever. Judges fall for that stuff. Especially if I play the devoted fiancé card. He's too logical. Too by the book. They'll see me as the victim. Click. That was it. That was all I needed. I sent the file to Devin. This going to help us? I asked. He replied 3 minutes later. Oh, absolutely. Let's set the table. The week after Richard called me, everything started falling into place. Every receipt I'd logged, every conversation I'd recorded, every cancellation I'd initiated, it all tightened the trap. It wasn't about ruining Clara's life. It wasn't about humiliating her. It was about making sure she never touched mine again. My lawyer, Devin, crafted a plan with the precision of a man who'd spent his entire career protecting people from exactly this kind of mess. We filed quiet motions for additional protections on the LLC. We tightened the trust ownership until even I needed multiple layers of verification to access it. Then we drafted a formal letter addressed to Clara and her parents. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cruel. It was factual, cold, unshakable. It stated, I had terminated all wedding-related contracts under my name. I was requesting reimbursement for the portions Clara's parents explicitly told me they would cover. I was declining all further communication with Clara except through legal channels. The home was legally protected and completely inaccessible to non-trust entities. Any further attempts to claim ownership would be treated as harassment or fraud, depending on the nature of the attempt. It ended with one final sentence from Devin. Do not contact my client unless you intend to proceed ethically. That's when the real fallout began. Clara's parents got the letter first, and because they still believed they held leverage, they called me, together, on speakerphone. I let it go to voicemail, then sat and listened like I was watching a slow-motion car crash. Melinda started. Asher, this is absolutely ridiculous. You cannot simply vanish, then demand payments for things you agreed to handle. Richard cut in. We'll reimburse our portion, but you need to come talk to Clara, face to face. Then Melinda again, sharper this time. And about the property, don't be dramatic, dear. Once things cool down, we'll figure out the deed transition. I actually laughed. They still thought they were running the show. They hadn't seen the documents. They hadn't heard the recording. They had no idea the walls were already closing in. Clara's reaction came 5 hours later. Not a call, not an email, a visit. She drove to the old house, the one I was no longer living in, and when she found it locked and empty, she drove straight to my office building. She waited in the lobby for 2 hours. Then she somehow convinced the receptionist to call me. Asher, there's a woman here. Clara, she says it's urgent, and she refuses to leave. I stepped into the hallway and watched her through the glass wall. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. Like she'd been cracked open by something she didn't see coming. I walked in slowly. She stood up like she was relieved and furious all at once. Asher. Her voice shook. We need to talk. No, I said. We don't. She blinked rapidly. So that's it. You're just walking away from us? You didn't even give me a chance. You had chances, I said quietly. You just used them to plan how to take things from me. Her face twisted. That's not fair. I took out my phone. Pressed play. Her voice echoed through the lobby. Worst case? I'll cry in court. Judges fall for that stuff. He's too logical. Too by the book. They'll see me as the victim. Her hand flew to her mouth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look angry. I just stood there, calm and steady, while the truth played between us like a documentary she'd forgotten she starred in. When the recording ended, I slipped the phone back into my pocket. I trusted you, I said, and you used that trust to draw up a blueprint for how to dismantle my life. I didn't mean. You meant every word. She stopped talking. The truth was undeniable. And for the first time, she had nothing to say. After a long stretch of silence, she whispered, Is there anything I can do to fix this? No, I said simply. And I meant it. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. You walked into a relationship looking for a prize, I said. Not a partner. That prize is gone now. Her jaw trembled. You can't just throw everything away because of one mistake. One mistake doesn't involve legal strategy, financial manipulation, and rehearsed courtroom tactics, I replied. That's not a mistake. That's a plan. She let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. And that's when the receptionist spoke up quietly. Ma'am, I think you should go. I didn't look at Clara again as she walked out. Not because I wanted her to feel abandoned, but because she'd already abandoned the relationship long before I ever walked away. A week later, I got a letter from her parents' lawyer. It said they would pay the outstanding amount. No apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just money. The check arrived 2 days later. And then, silence. No calls. No emails. No surprise visits. Just nothing. For the first time in months, I breathed. But the fallout wasn't done. Not by a long shot. About 3 weeks later, I got a call from Jenna. "Hey," she said awkwardly. You might want to sit down." "What happened?" Clara posted this long rant online about being betrayed and how her ex-fiancé ruined her wedding. She expected sympathy, and she didn't get it. Jenna laughed. "Oh, she got sympathy, just not from the people she wanted." "What do you mean?" "Well, some comments asked why you'd cancel everything. Others asked what really happened. People started digging. And then someone found her old comments on a bridal forum, where she said she planned to secure the house once married." I closed my eyes. "Is it bad?" "Bad for her," Jenna said. "People are roasting her. And get this, one of her design clients canceled their contract after reading the thread." I didn't smile, but I didn't feel guilty either. Actions have ripples, and hers finally caught up. 2 months passed. I moved into a new place, a quiet, modern condo overlooking the river. I hired new staff for my growing business. I started sleeping again. Real sleep. Not the restless kind where your mind replays conversations like a broken record. Roughly 3 months after everything collapsed, I got one final message from Richard. A simple text. "Thank you for leaving when you did. It forced us to see who she really is." He sent a follow-up. "I hope you find someone who loves you for who you are, not what you have." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I needed the validation, but because it confirmed something I didn't expect. I wasn't the only one she betrayed. She played her whole family, manipulated them, used them, and when the structure she built for herself finally collapsed, everyone saw the same truth at the same time. Clara's world wasn't destroyed by me leaving. It was destroyed by her own hands. And me? I didn't rebound immediately. I didn't rush to date. I focused on myself, my work, my peace, my future, and every so often, I'd look back, not with anger, but with relief. Because the moment she tried to take everything from me is the moment I realized I'd been giving everything to the wrong person. Months later, I ran into the florist who had accidentally delivered the news of the century. She recognized me instantly. "Oh, you're the groom who vanished," she blurted out, then reddened. Sorry, bad phrasing." I laughed. "No, it's accurate." She tilted her head. "So how'd everything turn out?" I smiled at her, calm, centered, completely at peace. And I said the truest thing I'd said in a long time. It turned out exactly how it needed to. And that was that. That was the moment I knew the story was over. Not because the revenge had landed, not because the fallout had settled, but because I no longer felt anything pull me back to the life I left behind. Sometimes the most powerful ending isn't explosive. It's quiet, steady, final. And my final line? The one that closed this chapter of my life for good? Simple. I didn't lose her. I escaped her.